Welcome to another episode of Dialed and Driven Hockey Mentality Podcast. Chris Palmer with Piranha Training, mental performance coach for hockey players. Jeff Lerg, goalie mentors, former professional hockey player. Today, we're going to talk about something that some people like to act like it doesn't exist, and it's suffering. I'm going to use it in a useful way. We're going to use it in a useful way and tell you real life things that happen, like we do every week, things that are usable for you. And I think the best way to say this is that suffering is the price of joy. If you want anything good in life, you have to suffer. People like to believe that it doesn't exist. People like to say that when you start talking about suffering, you're giving somebody an excuse. I don't know how many parents I've talked to, how many coaches I've talked to who wouldn't want to talk about mental performance ever. Because gosh, you open that door and all of a sudden you make people soft. You make them in a situation where you're coddling them. It's not the truth. The truth is, if you get to this thing that's behind everything, you can break through and get to where you want. Jeff, any thoughts as we open up?
Yeah, right. I think it starts when you're kids. If you kind of grow up in a fortunate environment like I did with loving parents, just like every parent wants to give their kids a nurturing, loving environment. And I had this conversation with my daughter the other day. She was going through a situation, or I didn't get as many turns on the swing as so-and-so. And I said, hey, life's not fair. You better get used to it. And that was not to be mean or rude to her. It was kind of in jest to say, hey, this is the type of stuff that'll happen, because there is a sense of suffering that every human being will have to go through at some point, of course, but also athletes to get to the levels that you're pursuing. There's always a level of suffering, whether you know it or not at the time. So when we chatted about kind of talking about this topic, I thought it was very relevant, kind of made me do some flashbacks on certain aspects of my life as an athlete that really, and even as a goaltender, that I view goaltenders as people who really kind of like this self-torture. Like, we sign up for this position and it's fun when you're starting and there's obviously no pressure to it, but then there's at some point something clicks where you start to feel the reality of goaltending. You start to feel the pressure of a game, or the reality of, hey, there's only two goalies on a team, I might get cut. All these little thoughts can come through your head. So what do you have to do to really drive through all that? Is you have to work hard. And working hard is not easy. Doing sprints and lifting weights and doing plyometric jumps and committing yourself is all a form of suffering. So those are my initial thoughts on what popped into my head as we chatted through this.
I mean, we could have just left that, and that's the entire thing. It's the whole story, and we could flesh that whole thing out. But I want to go back to this idea that you said as a parent, and parents do this, myself included. It's like, hey, your kid's got to be tough. You got to get tough. You have to handle this stuff. And if you fall, okay, like, let's get you fixed up and let's move on. And you can take the coddling side, which is, oh, my little baby, are you okay? That kind of a thing. And, nobody wants that for their kid because they know that life is hard and you got to figure it out. So I understand this sort of shorthand, this, oh, come on, you're fine. But you're fine ignores the fact that your kid develops and goes through life. Your kid's brain until they're 25 years old is still developing. The part of your brain that worries about everything, that assesses danger, that assesses whether something's safe or not. That's why you have kids who go on these trips to Mexico for graduation. They jump off of bridges, they bust their teeth because they didn't assess risk correctly. These kids, their brains are developing. I say kids all the way up into the NHL until you're 25. That's why you can't rent a car until you're 25 years old, because your assessment of danger is different. So if we look at kids as growing into adults, if we look at teenagers as growing into adults, if we look at young adults as growing into a fully developed adult, in the end, everything we hear, we're constantly assessing and putting labels on. And one of the hardest things is the feeling that you're not enough. And for a second, it's possible that your daughter felt like, oh, Dad, you didn't understand me. She didn't have the words for it, maybe. But you immediately kind of changed gears and you became a little more loving. So that's the trick, is to find this mix between acknowledging the suffering and caring for your kid and making them feel loved, cared for, and respected, while also letting your kid get back up and learn to be tougher. It's a great thing. But tell me some stuff specific to you. You've got some stories about some things that really talk about this suffering and getting past suffering.
Yeah, I think initially, just as you're a teenager growing up, you'd mentioned it, and then we've referenced many times that's the age when athletes, goalies, players, whatever position, start to see, wow, this goal that I'm setting out in front of me is more difficult than I thought. Many kids you watch the NHL as a kid, like, oh, I want to play in the NHL. I want to play in the NHL. And it's awesome to have a dream. It's awesome to have that big picture and hopeful goal. But the initial sense of suffering of trying to make a team, there obviously is that feeling of being cut. What do you learn from that? But I know from my experience of wanting to pursue high-level goals, I was taught at the teenage years, like how much time needs to be put in. And you're not going to live the normal life as compared to the rest of your counterparts. I didn't go to high school dances. I didn't go to prom, didn't go to homecoming. I didn't graduate from the high school that I went to my first 3 years of high school to. I moved away my senior year, moved to Omaha, Nebraska, graduated from a public school out there to go pursue my hope to get to college hockey. I didn't move out there with a commitment to a college hockey program. I went out there with the hope of saying, hey, I'm going to go do my best, see where the chips land, and see if I can get to the goal that I set out as a kid. So it was, that's an easy form of suffering that people can relate to. And I didn't view it as a suffering moment. I view it as I'm all in. This is what I want. But it is a sacrifice to many of those who don't necessarily want to give those things up.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think whether you look at a guy like Phelps, this amazing multiple gold medal winner, Olympian swimmer, saying there are a million days I didn't want to work out. There's a million days I just didn't want to do it. And he's at the top of the food chain, right? You get a guy like him, and he just decides that for him truly to be the best, to have a chance to be the best in the world by being the absolute best that he's capable of being, he's got to be all in. He's got to be dialed. He's got to give every single thing. And so there's so many days he just trained anyway. I remember I used to do these 4-mile morning runs every day in college. We ran like 75 to 90 miles a week, just crazy. And every morning, I hated when the alarm got off, but every morning at about 5 to 6, the alarm would get off. I'd have my shoes on by 4 minutes to 6, and I'd go run a half mile, be there right at 6 o'clock for a morning run. And, some of those morning runs, honestly, it was torture. It was freezing cold, but it's what you did because you wanted a chance to get what you wanted out of the sport. And that brings back this other concept. What do you want? Because there's a million ways to spend a life, right? We know life has all these options. Do you want to be a hockey player? Do you want to fight for these 60-something schools in D1 to have your shot? 1,800-ish kids in D1. That's what it is, which means maybe 450 spots a year. Do you want to do that? You want to give all you have across your entire childhood to get everything you want? Or would you like to have a different balance of things? And it's fine, choose. Not everybody has to be a hockey player, but if you want to be, if you really have this high-end thing, there is suffering that is the requirement to get to the top of this mountain. And you still might not get there. And that's the thing in life. You got to make peace with the fact that if you want something great, you got to suffer. If you have kids, you got to handle the fact that they're going to get hurt and your heart's going to be broken. If you want to go after something great and you want to buy a car, buy a house or whatever, there's the suffering of working to be disciplined enough to make these things happen. Every single thing requires some kind of disciplined suffering to get what you want. And you don't have to. You can chill back. Apparently, the rules of life are that you get to choose whatever you want. You could punch me in the face right now, Jeff. You could give your wallet to a homeless guy. Everybody's got this range all the time. So pick your life. But if you want something great, if you want something you care about, want something you give a shit about, you want to feel alive in your life some, to get past all the muck, man, just dig the hell in for what you want. Find a way to dig with every single thing you have, and that's the suffering. But if you don't make peace with the fact that there's suffering involved, and you don't know that that's the admission ticket for every good thing you want, or every good thing you hope for, then you're just going to have less.
And you said a few things there that made me have some flashbacks. And also, where we record our podcast here at my house, I have my gym, and right out behind Chris's head, I have this sign that says "Show up every day." And that's the first thing I see when I wake up in the morning. I get into the gym. And that was something I was taught as a kid, that 6 out of 7 days of the week, if you're really pursuing a goal, you have to do something highly productive to go and chase that goal. 6 out of 7 days of the week, you have to eat healthy, and you kind of get the one cheat day, so to speak, if you're really serious about your goals. And those are all difficult things to do. So I still do that. 6 out of 7 days, I'm coming down here for some form of activity, whether it's quick, because obviously life changes. I'm a dad now with 2 kids, but 6 out of 7 days, that's what I do. And it's still this form of self-suffering, self-torture at times, that I got to show up every day. Secondly, you kind of gave me, I would say, probably the most that I've ever had to dig in my career while pursuing my professional path. We talked about with me and even with my cousin Brian, who came on previously, the injuries and the ACLs. And I had a period of time my senior year in college, prior to my first game pro, I tore both ACLs. And you said, gosh, that has to be the worst part of your career. Like you had to think that you just, had no chance. And I said, no, I was pretty, maybe whether I was naive to it or just kind of showing up every day to do my best, that's what I did. But then after that, after I got healthy for a period of time, I was kind of finally getting in the flow of my professional path. So 25 years old, coming off 2 ACL surgeries, finally kind of getting my first taste of professional hockey. And I was finally kind of getting in a groove, feeling like the old Jeff Lerg. Got called up to the AHL to go back up a game. At the time, I was playing for New Jersey Devils affiliate. So, wow, now I'm finally kind of getting called up, even though I'm not penciled in to start, getting called up to go experience the American Hockey League, a league that I would have been able to play in right after college if I didn't get injured. So I'm up there. I go up for a weekend. I was in Trenton, New Jersey, was the ECHL team. I went up to Albany, New York for the weekend, sat on the bench for a Friday night and a Saturday night. And the next day on Sunday, the team had called me in and said, hey, we're going to send you back down. You're going to go back down to Trenton, which that was expected. So just imagine this. Now I'm in Albany, New York. My team in Trenton, New Jersey is preparing to leave on an overnight bus trip to go to Toledo, Ohio. That was one of our opponents in the ECHL. And so my day after they notify me of, hey, you're going to get sent down is, all right, Jeff, we got you a train ticket to go from Albany, New York to go through Central Station in New York City. And then you're going to hop off, you're going to change trains in New York City. And you're going to get the train from New York City to Trenton.
It could take 2 days to do that.
So I have 2 hockey bags on my shoulder, my overnight bag, a little extra backpack. I got hockey sticks. So I take this train ride. I change floors at Grand Central Station amongst chaos, trying to navigate my way by myself, carrying all this stuff. I get on the train. I finally arrive back to Trenton. I arrive in the evening, and our team is already at the rink loading up the bus to go on a 13-hour overnight trip from Trenton, New Jersey to Toledo, Ohio. So I'm like, okay, just get through it. And I was like completely fine with this. Like I was just in the zone. Whatever you guys tell me, I'm in. I got called up. I get sent down, no problem. So I go on this overnight trip. We wake up 13 hours. You wake up, first thing you do, usually you get to the rink and we have a team practice. Usually those practices, everyone's a little bit foggy. You're sleeping on a bus and it's just kind of get the cobwebs out. We're not playing that night, but we're playing the next night. So go to practice, going through it. I went from kind of the high of my games feeling back. I just got called up to the American League. 5 minutes in, 2 players shoot at the same time. I make a diving save. I shatter my thumb. So now I went from being up in the American League 2 days before to getting a cast on my thumb to being notified, hey, you're out minimum 9 weeks. Good luck. Go sit on the bench. We have to sign another goalie. So I missed my second full year pro, more or less, after obviously the ACL. So you asked me, was the ACL the toughest part of your journey? No. I will tell you that was my most difficult path. And of course, there's some soul searching to do at that time.
I mean, it's such a great example of suffering, though. And you found a way to suck it up. I mean, just real quick in that process, you're a guy who just acknowledges things. You're not a big guy like, cries to other people, right? But how did you get past that, the thumb thing? I mean, seriously, you had to be puking your guts out inside because you're finally back, finally have this chance, this long, ridiculous, convoluted trip with trains and buses and everything. How'd you get past that? I mean, it wasn't like 30 seconds and I'm better, right?
Oh, it was tough. There was, of course, luckily for me, and I mentioned many times, great support system. For me, we were in Toledo, Ohio, which is an hour from where I live. And coincidentally, a team that I was going to play, I ended up playing for 3-4 years after that. But we were in Toledo, so I had my whole family lined up to come see me. No one seen me play at pro. Parents, sisters, cousins, family members. My girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, we obviously heard her on one of our previous episodes. So I had a great support system. And then it became, hey, we're just going to come hang out with you. We haven't seen you. So of course, that took my mind off it briefly. But the reality hits when you're back in, you got a cast, your team starts practicing. And I had the goalie school, fortunately for me, to kind of keep me busy. I started this business as a sophomore in college. So it was just something throughout the course of the day where I could stay engaged and get my mind off it, do some other things. But it was definitely a tough time when every weekend you're sitting in the press box and you're watching the team play, and then you're watching a new goalie who came in, he's getting hot and he's playing all these games. And it was just kind of the old adage of control what you can control. Do what you got to do. Go do sprints on the bike if your thumb's broken. Go do core. Go do a plank for 5 minutes. Get your core as strong as possible. Work on getting full splits. Do these other things to kind of set other goals that you can do. And that kind of kept me at least engaged in the process. And then I did eventually get an opportunity to play at the end of that year. Our team was already out of playoffs, so everyone was more or less playing meaningless games to them. But yeah, though, that was for me. I just needed to do everything I possibly could, and I convinced myself I'm playing for my next contract. So the handful of games that I played once I got healthy, those were playoff games for me. I wanted to do whatever I could to extend my career because I had so much passion for the position and the sport. I obviously had a lot of success up until that point, so my belief in myself was still through the roof, and I always carried myself with a huge chip on my shoulder, so I liked the odds stacked against me. That's kind of what made me rise to the top. So I just kind of, this Jeff Lerg image that I built up in myself that everyone's against me, no one believes that I can come back. They don't think I can even get an NHL deal. Now I got 2 ACLs and a broken thumb. Just wait to see what happens when I get myself healthy. So that was really where my mind went.
That's awesome. So you actually went from this knee suffering to this thumb suffering, but then you went and decided to make your suffering headed forward. Like, I'm just going to go get everything I want. I still want to get everything I want. It's great. And I just want people to make peace with this because I got to tell you, probably 300 sessions a year, easily 300 sessions a year I have with people who have some sort of thing they're not talking about and something they're not acknowledging. And it's hard. And once we get past that, and whatever it is, in some cases, people wonder if they're just good enough to get to the next level. They doubt themselves, lack of belief. In some cases, it's feeling like, the parents have given up on them. There's a lot of guys I work with in juniors for free because their parents have given up on the hockey dream. They're rolling burritos for $12 an hour at Chipotle to pay for their hockey. So I think that there's just this stuff you go through. And I guess the thing I want to really give people peace about is life's really hard for everybody. And life's really awesome for everybody. It just depends how much you can make peace with. And if you think it's all supposed to be easy and good, you're going to suffer because of this thought you have. And if you think it's all going to be horrible, you're missing out on all the great stuff. And the truth is, it's both. It is. And honestly, just to people listening, have you ever hugged somebody you love? Did you ever win something with somebody you cared about? You ever go out with your boys or your girls on the ice and you're just fighting for something that you think there's no chance of and you're working together just because you give a crap? Have you ever shown up on the ice early just because you just like what it symbolizes? I mean, even for me as a runner, I was lucky. I was 4th in the country. I was All-American twice. I was sponsored by Nike. Really, really good things in that whole running world. But you know what I remember? You know what I loved? I loved these Saturday morning workouts on the track. I didn't love getting up for them at all. But my best memories are being on that track, collapsing at the end of an incredibly difficult workout with my guys. We're all in it together. There's just something amazing about that. There's joy on the other side of suffering, and suffering's the path to every great thing. It just is. So, do you have any other thoughts, Jeff, before I wrap up?
I'll steal a little phrase from Miranda Lambert. It's only worth as much as your time put in. And that phrase always hits me when I hear that song of hers because it's true. Like, if you have a mission that you're working after and you're going after, when you accomplish that mission, it's only worth as much as the energy and torture and suffering that you've had to experience to accomplish that. And that's a true statement. That's why for me, I love seeing a singer, for example, who grinded through and went country bar to country bar, was a no-namer, taking bus trips, traveled around the country. Then all of a sudden, one day you just hear them, they explode. I love the guy for hockey-wise who grinded his way through the minors and went from these low-level leagues, then all of a sudden made his way up to establish himself as a consistent NHLer. Like, those stories really get me because that's how I viewed myself was when I played. Like, I just viewed myself as this person who put all this immense amount of time and energy in, and I had the rate of accomplishing goal after goal. So that was the feeling. I loved it. Like, I just knew how much focus and self-torture I put myself through in order to get to those goals. So that's what kept me playing. That's what kept me going after more goals. I like that feeling of just the self-torture, but guess what? I'm going to go and accomplish what I was going after, and all that work is worth it.
It's awesome. Even David Goggins, love him or hate him, the Navy SEAL guys figured out a way to motivate him. Like when he wasn't really kind of performing well, they wouldn't put him in a challenge. Like instead of putting him in a hard challenge, they wouldn't let him do the challenge because he was so into the challenge. That was his reward. So they'd take away the opportunity, and that would work to get him to go wherever he has to go. But I guess I'd like to wrap up with a couple of things. I know there's moms and dads listening here. I know there's spouses, girlfriends, cousins, uncles, former NHL guys who have kids with a dream or a nephew with a dream. And in all of that, I just want you to think about what it was like to be a little kid, what it was like in the beginning to be that little penguin on the ice, waddling around. And in those early moments, remember what that kid looked like. Remember the smile on his face, the joy, even when he fell and giggled and laughed, when he made mistakes, when he failed and fell apart, when he could have just quit because, oh man, I suck, I'm awful, I'm terrible, I'm a piece of crap, letting my coach down, letting my team down. Somewhere we develop that algorithm in our head. We develop that if I make a mistake, this is where I go. Your kids were amazing in the beginning. Your family was amazing in the beginning because everything was adorable and everything was cute and everything was beautiful and it was all support and love and oh, it was great. Let's get pizza after ice cream. Like you were showing your kid that failing and suffering, it's part of the deal. Screwing up is part of the path. And somewhere we lose that. And I'm just begging you, only because I see this all the time, your kids, your spouse, your family members, whoever you support, if you surround them with a mix of love, caring, consideration, and interest in their lives as they go through their suffering and acknowledge the suffering while helping them realize that getting back up is the path to everything you want, that's the magic trick. Every guy we've ever known has either had love, caring, and support, or they've had to plow their way through. But unfortunately, when you just plow your way through and there's none of the other human connection, there's just something missing. And that's why you have guys who bust their ass their whole lives, and when the NHL career is over, they wind up drinking themselves to death. I know a guy who had 2 Stanley Cups, and he drinks himself to death because he's so miserable because he never ever felt enough. And I just want you to know, if you can really see suffering as part of the process and at least acknowledge it and realize that the getting back up and the going through harder stuff is the way to get every great thing, I promise everything changes. And that's what we want to share today.
And the path to hockey is never a straight line. You cannot predict where you're going to play the following year. You can't predict what's going to happen. You never know when injuries are going to come. You never know when you're going to get traded. There's always a sense of suffering. So to hockey parents, hockey goalies, hockey players, be prepared to suffer at some point and be prepared to have a higher mission than all the obstacles coming your way if you want to be successful. And that'll wrap up our episode today. Remember to stay dialed and stay driven on your goals, as that's the only way to accomplish success. And remember to follow us on all social platforms. We're at Dialed and Driven and dialedandriven@gmail.com. We'll chat again soon.
Lerg! One of the best saves you will ever see, keeps this game alive.
Chris Palmer again, the Hockey Mentality Podcast, Dialed and Driven.